Hey everybody, KMO here with another Out of My Head video, and today I'm just going to say a few words about the audiobook that I'm listening to currently. It is The New Geography of Jobs by Enrico Moretti. I didn't really have any associations with Enrico Moretti with that name prior to getting this book, and honestly I got it 100% because it was on sale for $3 on Audible, or $2.99 or something like that, and because the topic was on jobs. And that's, because I am the father of two teenage boys who are rapidly approaching the time when they will be expected to earn their keep, find a job, find a way to pull down enough income to keep a roof over their head and not depend on their parents anymore. That's a topic of great importance to me. So I started listening to it, and what I got from it right away was that this is very much a defense of and articulation of some very mainstream points of view on the topic of economics. We'll say that this is largely, he's not so much an apologist for neoclassical economics, it's just he articulates a very mainstream neoclassical economic worldview, but with an emphasis on jobs. And he's talking a lot about the bifurcation or trifurcation of the destiny, basically, of American workers, or Americans generally, and people in industrialized nations generally. But he's focused largely on the United States. I mean, the cover of the book features a map of the U.S. And he's talking about how in some areas, places like Seattle and San Francisco and Boston and Austin, you've got these what he calls at first innovation hubs or thick markets, but later he just shortens it down to brain hubs. And basically this is where these smart, creative, entrepreneurial people are gathering, and not only do they do better than their uneducated peers, but the uneducated people, or lesser educated people with just a high school diploma or even high school dropouts, they do better in the brain hubs than they do out in the hinterlands or in the forgotten, sort of decaying cities. So while Enrico Moretti is definitely, in the grip or the orbit, you might say, of the mainstream economists, and in fact, heavily leaning on one of their favorite buzzwords these days, which is innovation, he's also, directly admitting to and addressing the disparate fates of people in America, something which I see happening more. I see people acknowledge it more honestly on the right these days than I do on the left, particularly, in the mainstream sort of genteel right. I mean, you get people like Bernie Sanders, certainly, that's his bread and butter, talking about the very different fates, economic fates, and, the lives led by Americans. But largely on the left, particularly, the Silicon Valley left, what you get is unacknowledged but unquestioned support for the current economic order with super extra frothy focus on issues of race, gender, and sexuality. So I haven't even gone to read his Wikipedia entry. I mean, I don't know anything about this author other than what I've heard in this audiobook so far, and I just consider him to be, a right-wing figure, but by that I mean, a neoliberal figure. So all the heads of the Silicon Valley companies, as much as they pander to the social justice left, they're all basically far-right libertarians. And this guy is articulating their needs, their positions. He starts off early talking about how it is not the fault of banks, it is not the fault of investors, it is not the fault of the super rich, it is not the fault of the the chicanery, or you might say inventiveness, of the financial class, with their innovative financial products. None of these are to blame for the fact that some Americans are doing super well and a lot of people are really not doing well at all and can't even hope to match the lifestyle of their parents. I'm bringing all this up because longtime listeners to my podcast will know that I'm very skeptical of the idea that economic growth is an unqualified good, that it brings us nothing but good. Whereas Moretti, for him, it is as close as you can get to an unqualified good. I mean, the downstream effects of economic growth benefit everybody, and quite a bit. I'm also very critical of the idea that the answer to our current economic woes is more education. Train people who don't have technical skills and who have never demonstrated any sort of technical or abstract aptitude to get into programming. I think that is insane. I think that is absolutely insane. And when you add to it the assumption that the education that these workers are going to use to bootstrap themselves into relevance in the digital economy is something that they are going to pay for themselves, that's going to be very expensive, and which is going to be paid for by loans given out by banks with the government as the thumb breaker, the government being the enforcer, the collector of the debt on behalf of the financial institutions. I think that is not only insane, I think it's evil. But Moretti is making a very strong case for saying that, look, the benefits of education, not only to the people who get the education, but to the people who live near them, to the people who employ them, to the people they associate with, the benefits of education ripple out to everybody, and the benefits of education are underappreciated in our society, because if they weren't, a lot more people would be getting college educations, and they would understand that the ever-increasing price tag of this education is a bargain, that they are going to get returns that more than compensate them for the debt that they take on early on in life. And if you don't have to take on debt, if you have rich parents who can just, write that check, and you graduate with your, you graduate with your accreditation and basically no money. I mean, if you have zero money coming out of college, you are at a great advantage over the vast majority of college graduates who come out in the hole, often deep in the hole. $100,000 in the hole or more. And I picked that figure, $100,000, because Moretti says, yeah, to get a technical education, that's basically what it costs, but it's worth it. You're going to more than recoup that $100,000 over the course of your career, probably over the course of the first half of your career. It's not like a break-even sort of thing. You are going to make money by spending that $100,000 up front, even if you don't have it. That's his point. But then he also goes on to say that, don't major in French poetry. Not all education is created equal. And French poetry is just something I pulled out of my head, probably thinking about Groundhog Day. It's not a specific example that Moretti gives. Now, I will say Moretti is somebody who, this is a clue for me. He invokes the name of Tyler Cowen without, basically grimacing or barfing or, making a gagging gesture. Tyler Cowen is basically somebody who says, among many things that he has said, he's an articulator of the needs of the neoliberal, lords of Silicon Valley, that one of the problems with Americans is that they're not willing to take risks. They're not willing to move, across the country, to leave their family, their roots, their familiar situation, their communities, go someplace where they are unknown and where they don't know anybody, and, just start all over again in order to get ahead financially. He says Americans used to be brave like that, they used to be go-getters, and now they're getting to be squeamish little pussies like the Europeans. And I think that is stupid. Why? Because of my own personal experience. Yes, when I left grad school without my master's degree in 1996, and I moved cross-country, sight unseen, to Seattle, where I proceeded to get a job with Amazon.com and make a shit ton of money from the stock options. Yay. But thereafter, I have moved again and again and again. I've lived in multiple countries, multiple states within this country, multiple locations within most states that I've lived in. I have moved more than most people. And I have nothing to show for it. In terms of money, I have a great deal to show for it in terms of, scattered personal contacts and associations with people and the wealth of, personal experience. But in terms of how much money I have in the bank, I would have been much better off if I'd just, become a plumber in Kansas City, Missouri, the year that I graduated high school. Never moved, never picked up a book in my life, never pursued any sort of intellectual passion, just gotten a job in the late 80s, a blue-collar job, that is skilled, a skilled blue-collar job, and stuck with it for 30, 40 years. I would be doing much better than I am now as the poster child for, the willingness to drop everything, cut all ties, and move to the other side of the fucking planet. I've done it repeatedly. It does not benefit you unless you're moving very strategically. Just the random willingness to say, fuck it, drop everything and go do something completely different in an unstructured way, without any pull, without any special influence or connection. That is a recipe for personal disaster. And, maybe you'll be stronger for having lived through that disaster, those multiple disasters. Maybe I am, or maybe I'm just half nuts at this point. And maybe I shouldn't use the word half there. I don't know. Anything else I wanted to say about this book? I don't even know how far into it I am. I'm not paying super crisp attention. It's not like the AI books, but here's the thing. This is covering the same topics as the AI books and almost never mentions AI. It mentions technology, it mentions programming jobs, it mentions the companies that are working on AI, but he's not talking about AI. And I value that right now, because when you come across a story or an idea that seems like it explains everything, well, there's a couple ways to see it. You can see it as, the skeleton key, as, the super tool, which most people don't have access to, the super conceptual utility that will allow you to corral and make sense of all this seemingly chaotic information. A story that explains everything can be a super tool, or the story that explains everything can be the inescapable mind virus. Basically, it has got a lock on your imagination, and it is not allowing you to investigate or incorporate other points of view. And I worry about getting to that place with AI, because I think that artificial intelligence, particularly the current phase of the implementation of the narrow artificial intelligence, marked by deep learning, training algorithms with massive amounts of data collected from users with their permission, technically with their permission, because they just clicked, yes, I accept. That, for me, is a very compelling story right now. So to get this other perspective on the economy, one that includes and actually validates narratives that I have long since thought needed to be cut down rather than further validated, and one that is clearly coming from a point of view that I don't share, from the outset, is valuable to me. And, if you've listened to the podcast for years, you understand why it's valuable. And if you only know me on YouTube, it might not be clear just yet, but it's not anything that I can really spell out in adequate detail in this video. But fortunately, there will be another video tomorrow.